Hey guys, so that time again where I look at the rogue decks being played among some of the top ranked players on Dueling by looking through their replays in what I call a rogue analysis. So if you want to watch this type of content to see some good rogue deck options, then make sure to subscribe. So before I get into the data, the most important part is to quickly outline which decks are rogue, or rather which decks were not considered as rogue so that any other deck would be included. Now the obvious choices for not being rogue are decks like Tri-Brigade, Drytron, Prank Kids, and Dogmatic Invoke Shaddoll as well. Then there are other decks that I feel are more tier 2, and there will be some arguments here, but I consider Dragon Link, Virtual World, and Sky Striker as tier 2. As for Dinos, it's certainly not as good anymore since the misc limit, but I wasn't quite comfortable putting this as a rogue option just yet. And of course, the line between tier 2 and rogue can be a little blurry in a lot of cases. For example, I considered Ad Ignister as rogue, but some may consider that as tier 2, and it's just never going to be perfect. So this was the breakdown of the matches that involved rogue decks among our top ranked players. I typically go through top 100 ranked players for these rogue analyses, but this time I actually decided to go up to top 125. This was because not enough players were running rogue decks this time around, and I like to try to get at least 400 to 500 matches included, and I go up in increments of 25 players at a time, leading to 125 this time around. So this pie chart is based on 485 total matches among 33 players. So YGeoScope offers the last 20 replays per player, and sometimes all 20 replays would involve a rogue deck, or sometimes just as little as one match involved a rogue deck, which I included. So you see that Infernoble was the most played rogue deck among the top ranked players, which is not too surprising since this deck is always among one of the most played rogue decks in my previous analysis. It also recently finished second place at the last LCS, showing that the deck is still strong. And then you have Ad Ignister, which saw a lot of popularity since the release of some key cards in Lightning Overdrive. Some may consider this as a tier 2 deck, but I was not ready to put it there just yet. Next, surprisingly, we actually had Pure Zodiac still being played, despite the ban of Dryden on the last list. And then we have some ABC, followed by Phantom Knight Burning Abyss and Salamangreat. I am noticing that Salad is starting to see less and less play among the top ranked players. Given that Mirage Celio got put back to 1, I think at the beginning there was a lot of hype, but maybe now a lot of the players have moved on. And then we have some more decks including Adamantipator, Heroes, Medolce, Plunder Patrol, Subterra Dragoon, and anything with less than 4% of the matches contributed were put in the other section, which included decks like Altergeist, Endymion, and Magical Muskets. Now if we were to quickly look at how the graph looked at the last time I did a rogue analysis, which was 2 months ago in June, we saw a lot of Mech Knights and Phantom Knight Burning Abyss, which we did not this time around. The rest were pretty similar, with Sky Striker being considered rogue at the time of course because this was before they got engaged back. So overall, our top 125 ranked players piloting a rogue deck won about 2/3 of their matches. Now for the most part, they were running combo decks like Infernoble or Ad Ignister, with a little over a quarter of the matches involving a control deck instead, such as Pure Zodiac or Salamangreat for example. Decks like Mathmech and Mech Knights were categorized as beatdown strategies for this video. Now let's cover the top 5 most played rogue decks in more detail. Infernoble Knights won a little over 65% of the matches among the top 125 ranked players, which to be honest with you was a little lower than what I thought it'd be. When they won the die roll, they won 75% of the matches, while winning only 53% of the matches when they lost the die roll. They certainly do want to go first so that they can still do some hand loops with Aqua Dolphin or Omega, while still setting up some interruptions like Herald and the Charles Pop. I did expect them to have a higher win percentage when they won the die roll though, but we are of course dealing with small sample sizes as usual. Now in terms of this deck's performance among all players on Dueling in the last 7 days, and not just among the top players, this was the 18th most played deck overall, so this is among all decks and not just rogue decks. The deck won 57% of their matches among all players, which is actually not so bad for a rogue deck. Next up is Ad Ignister, which honestly sees a good amount of play among all decks in general and had an impressive 70% win percentage among our top players, had a pretty lopsided win-loss percentage as well based on the die roll, winning 89% of the time this time around when they won the die roll versus 50% when they lost the die roll. They look to set up Arrival at Ignister going first, which typically ends up being a 6000 attack body that's not affected by any cards, so that can certainly be a problem for a lot of decks out. Among all players on Dueling it was the 11th most played deck, so like I said, it's a popular choice among all players, and won a pretty good 58% of the matches as well. Next we have Zodiac, which somehow still is seeing play with players clearly having some success without Dryden. They are still a going second deck and as usual loaded with a ton of hand traps. The top ranked players using this deck had an impressive 70% match win percentage as well. Since they want to go second, winning the die roll doesn't really matter to them, as evident by the 70% win percentage whether they won or lost the die roll. Among all players in the last 7 days, it was the 17th most played deck, so just before Infernal Nights, and won just 52% of their matches. Given that they lost the key piece and Dryden, I think it's pretty cool that the deck can still function at a competitive level, so don't give up on this deck yet if you were looking for a rogue option. Now we have MathMech, and this is based on the 2 same players every time, and they always get into really high ranks on Dueling Book with this deck. I won't reveal their DB names just to respect their privacy, but I did play against one of them once on Dueling Book a few weeks ago, and he told me he's a subscriber, so if you're watching, then keep up the good work. Anyways, our 2 MathMech players won 77% of their matches with a very balanced win-loss percentage regardless of the die roll result. Now, the last time I featured MathMech on my rogue analysis, I talked about how YGO would categorize this deck as other/undefined, so I couldn't see its performance among all players. But now it looks like they actually did fix it and it can recognize MathMech, and not surprisingly, it was not played all too frequently, coming in at 59th. Among all players that played the deck, they did win 55% of the matches. So if you were looking for another rogue alternative, then clearly, if you're a good pilot like these 2 players, you can consistently do well from a competitive standpoint. And finally, we have ABC, and this one I can reveal the player name because I know he's commented on my videos before, and most of us on Dueling Book probably know him anyways, which is Pier555. He is always on ABC and always ranks so high, and this time there was actually another player who also played some ranked matches with ABC, so that in total it actually was able to make it to my top 5 cut. ABC Dragon Buster's effect to banish is nice, and they typically set up IP Masquerade as well, and probably have at least a hand trap or so. Even despite the Union Courier ban, clearly this deck can still function and do well depending on the player. So our ABC players won a really impressive 83% of the matches, although of course we are working with a very small sample here. Whether they won or lost the die roll, the match win percentage was equally impressive at around 81 to 86%. Among all players, ABC was the 32nd most played deck, winning around 55% of the matches. It is another deck that can be considered as a fan favorite, and I think it's great to see that it is totally competitively viable. Alright guys, so that was it for another round of my rogue analysis. Hope you liked that and hope it was helpful in narrowing down your choices for the next rogue deck that you want to play. If you want more analytical videos like these, then don't forget to subscribe and share the video with your friends. That's it for me guys, take care.